Now, please join us in welcoming Mr. Xavier Cortada.
It's so wonderful to be here at Miami-Dade at this campus. I remember when I was in Miami High, class of '82, none of you were born. Actually, that's true, probably. Most of you weren't born. I came to listen to a professor, a Miami-Dade college professor, talk about chemistry. And I think it was in this auditorium, except it didn't look like this. Is this the biggest auditorium on this campus? Okay, it was in this auditorium. How cool is that? That was 30-some years ago. And it was really cool. He was doing all these experiments on the stage with beakers where he looked at his Princeton Tigers colors and stuff like that. And to me, that was enthralling. That was exciting, to see this very eloquent scientist talk about the ability to transform, to inspire using science. And I took that with me when I went to the University of Miami as a freshman and started taking my biology and my chemistry courses. It was an interesting experience, and as I was parking my car in a very cool VIP parking spot, thank you, that was a sweet spot, I said, God, I know that building. And I remembered that moment in time. Art matters. Art matters in society. It allows us to see beyond ourselves, and I think art allows us to see things in different ways. I think that's the power of art. It allows us to change the way we see ourselves. So art isn't like some PR thing, where you amplify something that someone else wants. Art is a different way of looking at life. And science matters too. Science is, I think, what helps move us forward through observation and experimentation. And to be grounded in every decision you make with the creativity that the arts bring and the strength of science, I think are really important. In many ways, that's what the eco-art practice does. So I just want to take you a little bit through some of my practices where I try to combine both. So here we're at the Frost Art Museum. I created 4 elements for a community that has 2 seasons as a way of bringing 4 seasons. So every year, one of these banners, summer is water, fall is air, the yellow one, winter is fire, and spring is earth. These 40-foot banners get hung at the foyer of the museum. Now, why would I do this? Well, FIU's got a huge campus just like this one. And I wanted the students to walk by the museum, to see the outside of the museum and look in and see the different color telling you what season you're in. But also I looked at this staircase that looks like a branch in a tree. It's called a cantilevered staircase. So I imagined this big branch on a tree and these banners being the leaves. And what I wanted you to do is think about the trees that would have been there had we not built that museum. So these banners have the native leaves, the leaves of the native trees that could have grown in that very location had that museum not been built. Well, I did the same thing at the Florida Botanical Gardens, but in that case, not only did I do the exact same thing a year later, depict the trees that would have grown inside the atrium of that garden's main building, but then I invited the community to plant the actual trees that I had just depicted in this digital print. So the art took a different component. It wasn't just creating something that hangs on a wall. It's bringing that wall to life. I then took that a step further and created a wall of life. This life wall, if you will, is a wall of mangrove seedlings in water-filled cups, and you just saw a 2-minute video about it. Why would I put 1,100 water-filled cups in a museum and put a mangrove growing on it? What's the idea there? Right? Brings art, it engages you. Let's explore it a little further. So these are mangrove seedlings. They grow from propagules. And mangroves are really remarkable and important trees. They are incredibly powerful for global climate change issues. Mangroves help keep Florida in place. It allows the sediment not to erode. It literally holds your state together, fringing it around the peninsula. When Hurricane Andrew comes this way, or Wilma comes this way, Mangroves serve like this huge sponge that absorb the strength of that storm right in its roots. It creates a buffer to protect us inland from the devastation that could be caused by a storm, by a hurricane. So here are some Miami-Dade college students, some art students from the Inter-American campus, metaphorically creating a mangrove forest at a place where mangroves grew years ago, so that they could paint what would have been, or what was, a forest. It was a metaphorical forest that I was creating. This was called the Miami Mangrove Forest, and you may have seen it as you drive by downtown Miami. I decided then to take it to an art fair a few years later at Omni Art back in 2006. You can remember that part? And I created these installations, and I decided for the very first time to display these seedlings inside these water-filled cups for the very first time. This column you're seeing here is the first time I displayed them. This is before I knew there was going to be a reclamation project. And I did so because I wanted to literally bring them to life. I wanted people to see them. Behind them you see about 56 drawings where I literally hand drew every single one of those as little seedlings. Those are the images that the students used as they were drawing these mangroves. They were replicating my drawings. But I wanted to do more than just draw a mangrove. I wanted you to see the beauty of a mangrove. And that's why I put them in these clear cups so you could see the roots, and you could see many of them. And I thought that it was really important for people to see them in this context. I wanted you to see them serially so that you could see the nuances and the difference between each one. So here's an artist creating an installation where you have multiple mangroves. They're all growing. I wanted you to also see them grow through time. So in this installation over here, you start with a propagule, and in times it has leaves. I want you to see the magic and the beauty of a propagule become a seedling right before your very eyes, the magic of that moment. You take it for granted, but think about it. A little seed can create a plant and a flower. I mean, look at the magic of what that little DNA molecule could do. I mean, that's significant. That to me is a really impressive thing. And then I wanted to be cute about it because I don't think people understood. Here's at the Bass Art Museum. Have you guys been to the Bass Art Museum? It's on Miami Beach. It's near 21st and Collins. Well, at that museum, I created an installation. Years ago, that area used to be a mangrove forest. It used to have crocodiles and pelicans, right where you hang out. So the idea is that I wanted people to realize that before all that concrete and all that neon, right? Before all of that, there used to be something barer, something even more natural, more au naturel, if you will, and that was mangroves. That was a mangrove forest. So I decided to create an installation, and this is part of the video I shot at the museum, where these little mangroves were going back and reclaiming Miami Beach like they used to, except now they were on life support, right? So here you're at the Flamingo Pool. That used to be a habitat full of mangroves. It didn't need to be in a little water-filled cup. They would have grown naturally, thank you. They didn't need to go and have a date with an orchid on Lincoln Road. They could have just hung out by themselves and grown. And what we've done is we've paved all of that over to create comfortable situations for us and forgotten what I just spoke to you about 5 minutes ago, how important mangroves are. Remember all that conversation I just told you about erosion and hurricanes and lighting fish and all that? You know, you can't have it both ways, right? And that's what this project was about. It was about trying to have you better coexist with nature, which is why I created this project. We then went with volunteers, and on November 14th at 2 p.m., please join us. We went all over Lincoln Road, and we had the owners of the stores adopt the mangrove seedlings. We literally had them showcase them. This is Starbucks looking at the old Lincoln Theater. And the idea was for folks to walk up to this window and look at these things hanging on a window and go, what is this thing? And what would have seemed as the most bizarre foreign thing on the planet, which was a mangrove seedling, now you literally confronted it and go, oh wow, this is the most natural thing on that island. And let me show you the process, the way it worked. The first thing we do is we go out with volunteers To me, it was really important to get the volunteers out inside a mangrove preserve collecting mangroves. We just did that a couple of times. One was at Mathis and Hammock with some of you who were here, and we just did it a couple of weeks back. How many of you have been inside a mangrove forest? That's wonderful. Really? All of you have? That's exciting. That's really, really cool. Because I think too many people don't get what that is. They go, oh, that's a swamp, oh, that smells bad. But to me, the beauty of a mangrove forest is unparalleled to anything else. The way that light filters through, and it hits this lattice work of roots, and the waves are lapping on, and you see all of this biodiversity before your very eyes, from ibises to mangrove crabs. And you're walking, it's like you're literally walking inside a sculpture. It's like a mini cathedral that's organic and growing and living. And then you get what it is. You get how important it is. To me, it's exciting. It's also exciting, I think, to people who build museums. In many ways, both Stiltsville and those mangrove roots inspired the architects who are building the Miami Art Museum on Biscayne Bay. I mean, it's a beautiful architecture. It's not what you imagine. It's not a stick with a bunch of stuff on top. It's this. And to me, that was a metaphor for community, how all of us, right, are interdependent on one another. Not just from a natural point of view, but just in life, how we need and support one another to make it. How you need your parents to help you out, how you help out your little brothers, how your teachers help you. How we're not one solid trunk, but we're really a community of individuals. And to me, that was a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. And how the mangrove falls and sets its roots and creates its own community where others come in and build landmass. To me, was a beautiful metaphor of my parents' experience as Cuban immigrants in this community. They came like this little propagule from Cuba, landed here, and set their roots, right? So to me, the symbolism of what a mangrove is very community, very South Florida, very us, which is why I love this tree so much. Well, I take you there so that you can have poetry, and you can have life, and you can just be inspired while you're there. And then I take those and we take them to these locations on Lincoln Road, and the very people who collected those mangrove seedlings then go back and persuade a business owner at a store to hang this installation there. To basically say, you're standing where mangroves lived, could you please take care of this mangrove for a few months? During that period, that store owner watches that mangrove seedling grow in their store. They see this magic transform itself. So I want to share that excitement with the store owner, who then tells whoever's buying the Broad Victoria's Secret what this propagule is about. And all of a sudden you have an actor who didn't even know a thing about a mangrove before you showed up at their door, telling people in a very excited way about the importance of mangroves. To me, that is called social sculpting. That is where you as an individual are a sculptor trying to build a better world. And through your actions and activities, you create other chain reactions that allow others to see themselves in their world differently. At the end of the process, the seedlings are collected, and then they are planted by our volunteers on Biscayne Bay. So not only are you sculpting people's minds and ideas, having them see Lincoln Road differently, having them see their relationship, their stewardship in a different way, but you're actually literally changing the landscape so that once again we can regrow mangroves all over our coastal areas. To date, the Reclamation project since 2006, when we started it, has planted 8 acres of mangroves on Biscayne Bay. And that project has gone from Lincoln Road to other locations. We did the same thing with kids at a school in Tampa and in Pinellas County across the bay. It's been a project of different art installations, including here in Stewart, in Martin County, up on the east coast of Florida. Again, where volunteers collected mangroves. And to me, it's always, always, always a project where volunteers do everything. The volunteers collect the seedlings, the volunteers install them. I didn't create this installation, high school kids did, right? Here at Miami-Dade College, it's not me creating the installations, it's you are creating the installations. It's you collecting the mangrove seedlings from Mathis and Hammock. It's you that are going to distribute them on Lincoln Road. It's you that are going to plant them on December 1st. Because all I'm trying to do is create a platform for you to get engaged and involved, for you to better understand your world and your community, for you to realize that you have a role to play. That there's not something that some Everglades scientist does or some park ranger does. That this is your job to do. And that's how we build a stronger and better civic society. So these projects have had different iterations, and of course the biggest one is at the Miami Science Museum. But it also has had adaptations. For instance, I was invited to exhibit my art in Manhattan, in New York City. And over there, they don't grow mangroves. Mangroves grow south of Tampa. So we wanted to use the same idea, right, to create a reforestation campaign. And the essence of the mangrove campaign is that I'm taking these seedlings and I'm putting them on a modernist grid. I'm putting them on rows and columns. And I'm having you look at human-made objects, clips, screws, suction cups, human-made objects in the form of a grid. What does that remind you of? That's one thing. But think of the objects. Think of a Google map. Looks like a map, looks like, a grid. The city used to be wild, right? There used to be wilderness. And then we come in with bulldozers and we create avenues, streets, some terraces, some courts, a little parkway here. We get a grid, right? That's what we do. We bulldoze and create grids. So the installation shows you the artificial, human-made stuff. And then inside, I try to reclaim that artificial stuff, reclaim it, take it over, change it, by putting these organic propagules that are going to grow naturally, organically, fluidly. So I'm juxtaposing what is rigid and artificial with what's flowing and organic. So that's one of the things I try to do with this art piece. So you can see that it's at different layers. It's how I create, who creates it, most important part, how I create it, juxtaposing human and natural, or artificial and natural. So it's who creates it, how it's created, and where it's created. So we put it in the locations where mangroves used to be. We've adapted that now and we put it in places where mangroves aren't, because we want college students to see it and high school students to see it. But originally it was on Lincoln Road to do that. Well, we have the same concept. This Atlantic cedar, the one that's on these cups, was used by our pioneers and early settlers when the northern parts of New England and New York were settled. And they cut all the Atlantic cedar to build log cabins. So the very trees that are in these cups were used by early Americans to build their homes and create their own little grids and landscapes. So at this college, we created an installation where people adopted each of these Atlantic cedar saplings and planted them at home. Then I was invited to go to Taiwan. A lot of your stuff that you have on your shoes or on the back of your shirt was probably made there or in mainland China, right? Made in Taiwan, you've heard of that? Well, the way it gets shipped to Miami is in a container, really big boat, ships it over here for you to buy at Target, and then you're going to throw it away in about 2 months or 2 years because it's cheaper to buy a new one than to fix the one that just broke. Have you experienced that? Right? You buy a lamp, it's easier to just throw the lamp away and buy a new one for $10.99 than fix it for $42, right? You know what I'm talking about? Everyone understand that? So what's made, right, what's human made to be made obsolete is a big problem. It's part of the reason this planet is suffocating. And I wanted to make sure that I created an installation that had a container full of things that made in Taiwan but mattered. So what do you think I filled this container with? What's made in Taiwan that matters? Well, yeah, they have mangroves, but in this case, remember, I was adapting it. So I put plants, trees, in fact, flowers, native flowers that were in Taiwan. Taiwan's a densely populated area, again, like like Miami, southern Florida's fringe on the coastline. So I created a container, and in that container, I put a green flag like the one I put at the North Pole back in 2008. That flag was planted there as a symbol for people to plant trees in the world below. It's been used by kids at the Exploratorium and in Miami Beach High. In fact, every single school in Miami-Dade County for the last 3 years has planted a small little green flag in their school with a tree. Well, we tried doing the same thing in Taiwan, and in Taiwan we had the individuals each create their own green flag. My green flag said, "I hereby reclaim this land for nature," and my campaign was, "Let's plant trees in the world below to keep the world above, to keep the entire planet in check, to keep everything to do our part in addressing and mitigating against all the carbon that we're pouring out into the atmosphere." So by creating this artistic intervention, right, allowing individuals, again, to take action, to take responsibility, having people plant a green flag in front of their house and tell their neighbors to do the same, I'm doing the same thing that the volunteers did at the Miami Lincoln Road site, having volunteers be participants in sculpting a better world. Here, Taiwanese are planting native flowers in their homes, putting a green flag next to it, and asking their neighbors to do the same. Time and time again, that's the idea, to allow people to use art as a way of engaging others in community. It's a way of getting people excited and engaged and taking action. In all of these things, I always work with a scientist, with someone who has an expertise, and working with them, I come to figure out what the intervention is going to be. So in this case, it was Dr. Yang-Lu Ku who worked with me, and he's at this university in Pingtung, and he and I literally went through his research and figured out the two plants we wanted the people in Taiwan to plant it was this Taiwanese hibiscus and this red chenopodium, which is a tree that the Aboriginal population of Taiwan used to use in many of their rituals. So now you see that I'm also adding a cultural component to it, right? So it's about engaging community, it's creating a modernist grid, it's engaging people, it's about planting flowers that are made in Taiwan, the real thing, and it's a specific type of plant that, working with a scientist, we figured out was important for the population to plant, and on top of it, give them a little history lesson while we're at it. So it's how I work, it's how I roll, and that's why I was so excited when I was at Matheson Hammock and we had art students drawing and nursing students collecting and English students from creative writing and everyone there, not just environmentalists counting how many pelican eggs were there. You know what I mean? To me, it was important that the entire community was involved, and it was a multifaceted, multi-layered process. So this is the kind of art interventions that I do, and it is my hope that the same way I had this team in Taiwan that helped me make it happen, these are college students from the art college in the city of Kaohsiung, my hope is that there's a team here in your class that I can work with to make sure that Miami-Dade College not just reclaims mangroves for nature, but it reclaims the thousands of kids, the thousands of adults, the thousands of students, the thousands of individuals that are going to be our future leaders in Miami-Dade County. Reclaims them and allows them to reclaim themselves for nature. About 2 weeks ago, maybe less, the big slogan for this campaign was, "I hereby reclaim this land for nature." And then Jose sent a really cool email that I really enjoyed. And I like the idea of it being, "I hereby reclaim myself for nature." You heard me say a lot about you, I want you to, that's exactly right. I want you to understand how important and connected you are to nature. How essential it is that you realize that you're part and share the same biology with all these animals that we co-evolved with on this planet. And to me, it's important that every one of our partners engages students and works with students to inspire them to see themselves a little bit differently and to see the relationship to the natural world a little bit differently in a way that is more proactive, but also more humble. for you to understand that you are but someone who is borrowing from future generations, to paraphrase a Native American proverb. It doesn't belong to you, you're just borrowing this from your grandchildren. But more importantly, that it doesn't even belong to your grandchildren, that you're part of this bigger community, this environmental community, that you are literally part of our ecosystem, and that you share the same biology, and you can't deny that. So global climate change isn't just for the animals that are endangered. It's for the animals that are endangered, including Homo sapiens.